welcome to my channel. Subscribe, listen, and enjoy my stories every day. The rain hammered against the window panes, a perfect mirror of the turmoil inside me. Today was supposed to be like any other Sunday, a slow morning, coffee in bed, and the smell of jasmine from the garden wafting through our home. But nothing felt right as I moved restlessly through the quiet of our bedroom. Elise was out for her routine morning jog, her figure a disappearing speck against the gray canvas of our sleepy neighborhood. The house, filled with the echoes of our decade-long marriage, now felt unfamiliar, its secrets heavier than before. I wasn't looking for anything in particular when I opened the top drawer of our dresser. It was more a displacement activity, a way to quiet the nagging sense of something amiss. But there it was, an open package of birth control pills, half hidden under a jumble of scarves. My heart pounded in my ears, a slow, rhythmic crescendo that filled the room. We had stopped using protection years ago, a mutual decision born from countless nights of hopeful conversations about our future children. The betrayal stung, sharp and unexpected. The pills rattled faintly as I picked up the box, the sound a stark betrayal of our dreams. The front door creaked open downstairs. Elisa's footsteps were light on the wooden floors, her presence suddenly foreign in what had always been our shared sanctuary. I tucked the box back into its hiding place, the weight of my discovery anchoring me in place as she climbed the stairs. "Hey, love," Elisa's voice was bright, too bright. "It's miserable out there. Thought I'd cut it short today." I managed a nod, my throat tight. "Coffee?" I offered, my voice barely above a whisper. She smiled, nodding, and brushed past me into the bathroom. The sound of the shower running was a brief reprieve, giving me a moment to collect my shattered thoughts. Sitting at the kitchen table, I listened to the coffee drip steadily into the pot, each drop a tick in the long timeline of our marriage. By the time Elise joined me, her hair damp and her cheeks flushed from the steam, the kitchen was steeped in the rich aroma of coffee and a heavy silence. We sipped our coffee, the space between us filled with unasked questions and unsaid accusations. Finally, I broke the silence. "Elise, is there something you need to tell me?" My voice was calm, but the underlying tremor betrayed my turmoil. Her eyes flicked to mine, wide with an unreadable emotion. "What do you mean?" Her response was too quick, too guarded. I leaned forward, the coffee cup warm in my hands. "I found something today. Something that doesn't make sense unless there's a good explanation." Elise set her cup down with a clink, her facade beginning to crumble. "Mark, I..." The doorbell rang, slicing through the tension. We both flinched, the sound a harsh intrusion. I stood up, my legs stiff. "I'll get it," I muttered, but as I walked to the door, I knew. The trust we built over a decade was cracking, the fissures too wide to ignore. Whoever was at the door was just another diversion from the conversation that, once started, would unravel everything. Opening the door, I was met with the last person I expected. There, on our front porch, stood Chris, my best friend, his face ashen, eyes darting nervously behind me to where Elise would be waiting. "Chris. What are you doing here?" My voice was a mix of confusion and a rising anger, an anger that was looking for a target. Chris looked past me, then back into my eyes, a silent plea evident in his gaze. "I need to talk to you, Mark. It's about Elise." The words hung heavy between us, the rain a dull roar in the background, as the foundation of my life began to crumble. The cold breeze that followed Chris into the house seemed to cut straight through me, leaving a chill that settled deep in my bones. Elise appeared at the kitchen entrance, her face a mask of confusion that shifted quickly to alarm when she saw who was standing with me. "Chris. What's going on?" Her voice quivered slightly, betraying her calm demeanor. Chris shifted uncomfortably, avoiding Elisa's gaze. "I think we should all sit down," he suggested, his voice heavy with reluctance. In the living room, the three of us took seats, an awkward triangle of tension. Chris looked at me, his expression grave, then turned to Elise with a hesitant pause. "I'm sorry, Mark," he began, his voice strained. "I didn't want to be the one to tell you this." Elise's face paled, and she reached out, gripping the armrest tightly. "Chris, whatever you think you know." "It's not just what I think, Elise," Chris cut in, his tone firm. "I've seen you, with Derek." The name hit me like a physical blow. Derek was my colleague, a supposed friend whose laughter had filled our home during countless dinners and get-togethers. My head spun as I tried to piece together the fragments of deceit. "Why?" The question was directed at Elise, but she only shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "I was going to tell you, Mark. It got out of control." Her voice broke, the weight of her confession bending her posture. I stood abruptly, my chair scraping against the wood floor. "Out of control? Elise, you betrayed me. With Derek, of all people." Anger surged through me, a fiery, uncontrollable torrent. Chris stood as well, placing a hand on my shoulder in an attempt to calm me. "Mark, I think there's more you need to know. About Derek." "What now?" "That he's been laughing behind my back this whole time." I spat out the words, my gaze fixed on Elise. "It's not just that," Chris replied. "Derek's been involved in some shady business dealings. I found out because he tried to rope me into it. When I refused, I started keeping a closer eye on him. That's when I saw him with Elise." The room seemed to spin as Chris's words sank in. Betrayal layered upon betrayal. "We need to confront Derek," I said, my decision firm. "I want to hear him admit it." Chris nodded, and we made plans to meet Derek the next day at a local cafe, a public place where things were less likely to escalate uncontrollably. That night, after Chris left, Elise and I sat in silence. The space between us had grown, filled with secrets and lies. Finally, Elise spoke, her voice a whisper of its usual self. "Mark, I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I was lost, and Derek, he was there. But why the pills, Elise? Why lie about wanting a family?" I asked, my voice hollow. She sighed, a long, defeated exhalation. "I was scared. About being a mother, about our future. I thought I could figure it out before you found out." Her admission stung, reopening the fresh wound of her betrayal. We went to bed separately that night, the distance between us a gaping chasm filled with heartbreak and mistrust. The next morning dawned clear and bright, a stark contrast to the storm inside our home. As I prepared to confront Derek, the weight of the coming confrontation hung heavy on my shoulders. What would he say? How could I possibly reconcile the friend I thought I knew with the man who had betrayed me so thoroughly? The plot to unravel the truth was set, and as I left the house, I felt a resolve harden within me. This was not just about revenge, it was about reclaiming my life. The morning air was crisp, a brisk reminder of the confrontation that awaited. I parked outside the cafe, a quaint little spot where Derek and I had shared more than a few coffees discussing work and life. The irony of the location wasn't lost on me. Today, however, the stakes were far different. Inside, Derek was already there, sitting at a corner table with a clear view of the entrance. His usual easy grin was absent as he caught sight of me approaching. The tension was palpable, a tangible cloud hanging over the table as I sat down across from him. "Mark," Derek greeted, his voice cautious. "Chris told me you wanted to talk." Straight to the point, I didn't mince words. "I know about you and Elise." Derek's face stiffened, his eyes narrowing slightly. "I see. And how do you feel about that? How do you think I feel?" My voice rose slightly, drawing a few curious glances from nearby patrons. "You were my friend, Derek. And you stabbed me in the back." He sighed, leaning back in his chair. It wasn't planned, Mark. It just happened. Just happened. I scoffed, disbelief coloring my tone. You expect me to believe that? It's the truth, Derek insisted. Look, I know I messed up. I'm not here to make excuses. I eyed him skeptically. And the business dealings Chris mentioned. What's that about? Are you not only cheating with my wife but also involved in something illegal? Derek rubbed his forehead, a gesture of stress I was all too familiar with. It's not what you think. I got involved with some guys who, well, they weren't on the up and up. I wanted out, but it wasn't that simple. And you dragged Chris into this? I pressed, my anger mounting with every revelation. He saw something he shouldn't have. I tried to keep him out of it, Derek explained, his tone earnest. I shook my head, frustration boiling over. This is a mess, Derek. You're not the person I thought you were. Derek nodded sadly. I know, and I'm sorry for everything. If there's any way I can make this right. Start by staying away from Elise, I cut him off sharply. And clean up your business mess. Our conversation was cut short as my phone buzzed. It was Chris, sending a text, got something important. Meet me ASAP. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the tile. This isn't over, I warned Derek before turning to leave. The cafe's warm atmosphere contrasted sharply with the cold fury settling in my chest. I met Chris at a small park nearby, the urgency in his text reflected in his tense expression as he waited. What's going on? I asked as soon as I was within earshot. It's about the guys Derek is involved with. They're dangerous, Mark. More than we thought, Chris explained, handing me a folder filled with photos and documents. I did some digging. They're connected to some serious criminal activities, not just shady deals. I flipped through the documents, each page adding weight to my dread. What are we going to do? We need to be careful, Chris said, looking around nervously. I think we should talk to the police. And you need to protect yourself and Elise. The mention of her name was a stab of reminder of her betrayal, but now wasn't the time to dwell on broken hearts. Let's go to the police now, I decided, my resolve firm. It's the only way to sort this out safely. Together, we headed to the nearest police station, the documents in hand. As we walked, I knew that the upcoming days would test me in ways I had never anticipated. The confrontation with Derek was just the beginning of a longer battle, both within and against the darkness that had seeped into our lives. The police station was cold and impersonal, echoing the chill that had settled in my heart. Chris and I sat in the sterile interrogation room, the folder of evidence laid out before the detective, a stern woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing. We appreciate you bringing this to our attention, she began, flipping through the documents with an efficiency that spoke of years in the force. We've been tracking this group for a while. Your friend Derek's involvement was known to us, but we didn't have enough to bring him in. My heart sank deeper. So, you knew and just let him be. It's not that simple, she replied. We needed more concrete evidence, and it looks like you've given us just that. As the meeting progressed, plans were made to raid the locations tied to the criminal group. The detective assured us of Derek's impending arrest, which provided cold comfort. What burned inside me wasn't just betrayal but also the agony of shattered trust. Leaving the station, Chris clapped a hand on my shoulder. You okay, man? I shrugged off his concern, my mind whirling with the day's revelations. I need to think, Chris. Thanks for everything. As I drove home, the street seemed different, shadows more pronounced as if reflecting the darkness that had touched my life. Arriving home, I found Elise waiting, her eyes red-rimmed, her posture tense with apprehension. Mark, we need to talk, she said as I entered, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, steeling myself for what was to come. I know about Derek and the police. It's over, Elise. She flinched as if struck. I'm so sorry, Mark. I never meant for any of this to happen. It's not just about Derek, I said, cutting to the heart of the matter. It's about us. Why didn't you want to start a family with me? Elisa's face crumbled, and she sank into a chair, her hands trembling. I was scared. But there's more. She took a deep breath, her next words coming out in a rush. Mark, I have a medical condition. I can't have children. I was afraid to tell you. The room spun, her words a sucker punch to my gut. Why didn't you trust me enough to tell me? I thought I'd lose you, she sobbed. And then Derek happened. He was a mistake, a terrible mistake. I paced, my emotions a tornado of anger, betrayal, and heartache. You chose to lie, Elise. You chose to betray me. I know, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life, she cried out, reaching for me. I stepped back, her touch now foreign. It's too late. We stared at each other, the chasm between us too wide and too deep to ever bridge again. After a moment, I turned away. I can't do this. We're done. The divorce proceedings were quick, emotionless transactions. The house sold, the memories boxed up and parted with, just like our decade together. I moved to a different city, the fresh start cold but necessary. Months later, I sat in a cafe, the clatter of cups and chatter around me a balm to my jangled nerves. My phone buzzed, and I glanced down to see a message from Chris. Turns out Derek wasn't the mastermind. Caught the real guy today. Derek was trying to get out, warned us anonymously. The message was a final twist, a revelation that came too late to mend what was broken. Derek had betrayed me, but not in the way I had believed. Yet, the true betrayal had come from Elise, not just in her infidelity but in her deceit about something as fundamental as our future. As I put my phone away, I realized that some truths were too painful to heal, some distances too vast to close. The betrayal, though understood, could not be forgiven. The cafe's warmth contrasted sharply with the cold resolve in my heart as I looked ahead to a life built anew, alone but unburdened.